Being a young sprout, such as I am, this is my first foray into the point-and-click adventure genre, as I'd never played one before. Upon completing the game, I can report that my premiere experience was anticlimactic to say the least, but an intriguing journey nevertheless. Clearly inspired by the Sierra classics of old, Crowalt tries to deliver an original tale filled with mystery and wonder with some amount of success. You assume the role of adventurer and irreverent thrill-seeker Hugh Radcliffe in a quest to uncover the enigma surrounding the isolated town of Crowalt and the lost colony that inhabit the island. Whilst you launch your investigation, you will be met with various obstacles and puzzles that you must overcome to unravel the secrets of this strange land, as well as quirky characters that will help you along the way. Traces of the Lost Colony is touted as a game that merges traditional storytelling with modern-day pixel art graphics by first-time developers Madcraft Studios. They also highlight that the choices players make will affect the course of events, and in this way they'll draw their own paths towards a curious ending of the game. While the ending is indeed curious, the choices that are presented to the player here don't have much consequence, or as much as they would have you to believe. Crowalt is admittedly a charming game. Its strengths definitely lie within its storytelling and written dialogue. The pace at which the story unfolds is engrossing, but the climax is just a little jarring. The town and its inhabitants are genuinely interesting, and some of the background art in the game can be particularly pleasant on the eyes. Despite all this though, the gameplay does contain some serious flaws, not least of which being its extremely primitive puzzle-solving mechanics and the tedious fetch quests featured within. The best analogy I can conjure up to summarise the puzzle formula is this. Imagine you're trying to put together a jigsaw in your living room, but you store all of the pieces in a locked basement and you keep the key in the attic. This is Crowalt, Traces of the Lost Colony in a nutshell. That is to say, often you will have to jump through several hoops to achieve the simplest of tasks. This would make sense if the overarching questline required you to perform various feats in order to make progress, but instead, you're forced to backtrack to and fro the same locations for menial errands. As previously mentioned, Crowalt is a point-and-click adventure game, but its limitations are evident from the offset. First off, you're restricted to a two-dimensional plane, so points of interest, items and objectives are painfully obvious and easy to identify. It also renders a traversal mundane and boring, as you'll be constantly mashing the bottom right or left sides of the screen to move Hugh. Too often will it have you trek to the far corners of the map and all the way back again to either relay some information, retrieve something, or deliver something. This quickly becomes tedious, especially considering that most of the solutions to puzzles in this game feel arbitrary. Furthermore, some solutions or items are locked off until activated by the problem itself, subsequently stifling proactivity at times. Instead, you'll have to retrace your steps and try old sources again to see if they have become obtainable. This is exemplified by a voodoo doll you discover very early in the game that you can't pick up until you've met the witch that's bound to it. Hugh is quite happy to pick up other random bits of rubbish scattered throughout Crowalt, so why not everything? The only aspect that stood out in general problem solving was the ability to approach a problem in multiple different ways. For example, after Hugh's first night in the town's inn, he's forced to pay a fee for their service. Having only one coin to his name and needing two, you must investigate the bar and find a way to raise money, of which there are a few options. Seldom have I seen this level of agency in gaming, and it was a welcome surprise. Unfortunately, it never amounts to anything meaningful though, but it's still appreciated all the same. Another aspect that was refreshing, but similarly failed in its execution, was the various minigames sprinkled throughout. The first minigame featured here piqued my interest for its apparent inventiveness, and if this was to establish the precedent, then this title could have had promise. Hugh must gain the trust of the inn's owner, and in order to do so he must tend the bar while she runs an errand, with the caveat of only having limited stock. So, you must ration out the alcohol by deciding the ratio of beer to water depending on how the customer orders the drink. A pirate who has lost his finger in a game of five-finger fillet may need a particularly strong drink, as opposed to the town beggar who can only afford one drink anyways, so he'll consume what is given. Whilst these two examples work as they're on opposing ends of the spectrum, the other 8 orders are so vague and hard to judge that it devolves into guesswork. It was a really good idea, but a poor execution unfortunately. Despite hundreds of examples over many decades, Crowalt never manages to innovate on a genre that has seen so many stellar games. It's a shame too, because it did show glimpses of doing so. Maybe if it had focused more on the dialogue-based minigames, open-ended quests, and varied up the errands significantly, this could have been a solid game. Although the gameplay does fall short of expectations, the story and characters embedded within this title are actually quite riveting. relatively speaking. I was surprised to discover that the game was inspired by true events, creating a fictional tale around a failed attempt to create the first ever permanent English settlement in North America. Madcraft Studios obviously take liberties with the source material, but it only adds to the intrigue as the overall story depicted here is actually pretty good. It doesn't execute its plot beats perfectly, nor does it ever feel as though you get information that's relevant to the larger issues at hand, but it still does create an ominous atmosphere. It does a great job at dropping in little nuggets of dialogue that allude to the ambiguity of Crowalt, but when considering the ending, it's rather redundant. Not that you'd know at the time though. Crowalt's biggest crime is locking the mystery behind a character who knows all of the answers. Instead of systematically unravelling the secrets of the island yourself, all that is required is that you appease this character with the aforementioned fetch quests until he eventually spills the beans. Without spoiling too much, the revelation is that your character is none other than the Chosen One, but you need to be tested to prove as much. Only you have the power to aid the Lost Colony. But a certain liaison you encounter throughout the story already knows where the colony is and how to save them. What he serves as then is an exposition dump at the end of the game to explain the plot twist. A twist that would have been absolutely awesome had it been drip fed to you throughout the story and revealed at the end in a different way. In short, the story content is solid and makes the game worth playing. The writing is competent and it does a good job of conveying the characters as unique entities. However, it can still be cumbersome in its delivery, especially in regards to its major plot points. Crowalt Traces of the Lost Colony is evidently an indie game, so its calibre is limited. For the most part, its presentation is commendable though. The background art and environments are particularly well crafted and fit the mood of the town excellently. Add to this some appropriately whimsical yet foreboding backing music and the atmosphere is established adeptly. However, Hugh Radcliffe himself looks shocking. I despise his character design as well as the art design for all of the characters in the game. The quality is just wildly inconsistent. Forgetting the stereotypical depictions of the pirates and Native Americans who also look terrible, all the characters look half finished. Sometimes they will have cartoonish black outlines around their model, but only on some parts of the bodies. The backgrounds and items do not follow this universal style either, so there's a huge disconnect between the characters and the world. This spotlights the game's poor graphical fidelity, but it could have been avoided so easily by having better quality character models. Moreover, the animations are very basic, but point-and-click adventure titles have never been renowned for slick animations anyways. It could have used some feedback cues for using an item incorrectly, but that can be forgiven. I personally would have enjoyed seeing Hugh use some of the items I've collected over the game in realistic ways, but they do a good job at compensating for this with dialogue commentary. These niggling issues compounded with the irritating fetch quests and the strange delivery of the ending make for an underwhelming experience. It's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but it does leave much to be desired. It appears to be the first attempt from Madcraft Studios, and if this is what they can produce at the first time of asking, they have a bright future in the industry. I look forward to seeing what they can create now that they have some serious experience under their belt. If they take a little bit more time and make their next project slightly more polished, I think they can produce something special within the indie space. However, this time they just fall short of the mark. 1UP Gaming's final verdict for Crowalt Traces of the Lost Colony is 2 stars out of 5.